Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January edition of our Sheep and Goat webinar series. It is January 27th of 2025, and I am pleased to have two folks here from our extension team tonight. First, I'll introduce Travis Hoffman. Travis is our sheep specialist, extension sheep specialist for both University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University. And our speaker tonight is Mr. Troy Salzer. Troy is an extension educator up in St. Louis County, so that's way up in northeast Minnesota, and he is for agriculture production systems. So if you have a farming question, Troy can probably answer it. So we are going to be talking all about lambing and kidding kits. And you're like, what is that? Why do I need that? Well, Troy is going to tell us all about that and why it's super important to have everything in one spot and be prepared before your babies hit the ground. So with that, I will let Troy take it away, and we'll see what he's got to say. And he has a whole bunch of products to show us. So go ahead, Troy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this evening. I think that from my point of view, having a preparation or taking the necessary preparations to get all of this stuff together will help you have a much more successful lambing and kidding season. In my case, I have the opportunity to work very closely with many producers. And one of the things that really is the key to getting started successfully is having all of your stuff put together and being pre-prepared, understanding that these does and ewes aren't on a particular timeline. They are just like humans. When it's time to have their kids and lambs, it's time to have their kids and lambs. And sometimes that's early, sometimes it's later than expected. But having all of this stuff put together a couple weeks in advance is really advantageous. So, one of the first things I would encourage you to do is think about the aspects of what it takes to have a successful environment for those newborn kids and lambs. When they are born, they are wet, they cool off very quickly. They only have so much brown adipose tissue to create heat. And so creating an environment that is warm and dry and clean is really, really critical. Um, there are some folks that like to lamb or kid in warm buildings. I don't necessarily think that that is the most important because sometimes we can run into problems with ventilation issues in relationship to that. And they need dry air that's not humid to avoid things like pneumonia. And so getting those lambs and kids dried off early after parturition is really critical. And having a nice bedding of straw is very, very helpful in that it suspends them up off of the ground and creates insulation, especially those of you that have concrete floors. So wherever your lambing jugs or kidding jugs are, um, getting them bedded down in advance of when you need to use them is really an important detail. This goes along with all of the equipment actually that we're working with. Having a bucket with some sanitation like Novacin or bleach, soap, all of those things are really important to have available at the time and making sure that that area is clean from that standpoint. So I would like to show you basically pan all of the items that I have here in our kitchen in relationship to different styles of the same pieces of equipment that I'd like to share with you. None of these necessarily are needed specifically, but they're just a wide variety of different products that you can utilize as you're going throughout the year. I have items over and above what is on the list, but we'll talk about them briefly as we go through. And I know that Brenda actually emailed you the list out, lambing and kidding kits. Um, and so if you don't have that yet, you can Google that on your search browser and find that online as well. So what I will do is I will show you. So here is all the items that I have pulled out for you. And this isn't to advertise for any one particular product. Um, I personally have many of these items on hand, but I also went and borrowed some from one of my neighbors that utilizes some of these things. And he gave me some really great ideas as well in regards to things that have been kind of easy ways in which to put this all together. So I had mentioned a bucket, to wash up after clean up the ewe or doe when it's time. Different solutions um, that can be utilized as antiseptics. And then I really encourage people to include in their kit a roll of paper towels so that you can wipe the lambs and kids off if necessary. Also, your own hands, because whenever they are wet or it allows them to cool down much, much faster when they lose that heat through that component. I always keep a good supply of long sleeves on hand. By doing that, you minimize the risk of carrying bacteria into the uterus of your animals, and that is one thing we really want to avoid doing because that is pretty much a sure end to their life. Um, we also use latex gloves. Keeping a few pair of these uh, in your belt kit is extremely helpful so that you have them immediately on hand. And I really do encourage that. In the kit itself, I also like to have a halter so that you can restrain the animals. Of course, you are going to place them in the lambing jug or kidding jugs so that they can't get away from you. But then also utilizing that halter to keep them in place. And oftentimes, I encourage you to, if you need to assist in the process, I also encourage you to have someone else that helps you hold that animal, keeping them still, because otherwise, what happens is just about the time you think you've got things figured out, the animal moves and you have to start all over. And you want to minimize that time that you are interfering with that process. And so, with that in mind, I really encourage you to think about having access to some assistance with that in mind. Now, as I reach across, I actually have a toolbox. Make sure that you get one that is big enough to handle all of these items that you maybe need from time to time during lambing and kidding. You might not need it every time that you have a new birth, but by having it all in one place, you can go grab it. You know where it is. It helps to keep the products clean inside of there and dust free because the lid closes up nice and tight. And you want to have that so that you don't have to spend time looking for different components of your kit from that standpoint. I encourage you to have different syringes of different size, especially with sheep and goats. These smaller ones, the 3cc, are a nice size from the standpoint that they are more closely calibrated so that if you only need a cc and a half, that you actually get an accurate measurement in relationship to administering that. And then, of course, keep the appropriate size needles on hand. Generally 18-20 gauge, depending on the product that you're administering, is something nice to have with those syringes. Now, those specific syringes that I showed you are disposable, and from the standpoint of ease of use and what have you, that is great. You can also purchase nylon. They're a little bit stouter in relationship to the abuse that they can take. And then, of course, you have your repeater syringes where you can put multiple doses in, and they're actually calibrated to give the right amount. Every time you squeeze, let off, it reloads itself, and you can move on to the next kit that is up next. This is especially important when you're going to do a lot of vaccinating, maybe later on for the ewes in anticipation of lambing. Those would be times in which the repeater syringe really works well as compared to just giving single shots randomly throughout your flock. Might be a way in which to utilize the single dose sort of option. In most cases, it speeds your process, but also does perhaps a little bit more accurate job of administering the right amount. Next in that kit, of course, you would want to have a good headlight like this one. There are many good varieties out there. Make sure that it's got new, fresh batteries in it before you start your lambing or kidding season. I encourage you to use ones that fit very nicely on your head so that you have your hands free to do what you need, and yet you can still see in relationship to that. And then also have it adjusted so if you are wearing a stocking cap, that you can put that on top of your head and your hat doesn't fall down into your eyes in that process. Otherwise, that can be kind of frustrating as such. One of the items that Dr. Joe Armstrong really stressed in relationship to assisting births is the aspects of lube. This here is called Super Lube, small container. You can purchase this up until gallon jugs. If you purchase large quantities of it, I highly recommend actually going ahead and getting a small jug like this so that you can easily put it in your back pocket or in your front pocket, so that when you're going out, it stays warm, it doesn't freeze, because otherwise, once it's frozen, it doesn't work nearly as well as when it's fresh in relationship to that. As you utilize it, lube your hands up real well, and then your sleeve as well if you need to enter. And oftentimes you don't always have to go in very far to assist in the birthing process, but lubricating that up so that it's very easy to put your hand in is extremely helpful to keep from the cervix or vulva squeezing down on your arm, causing your arm to get tired, but also to help your doe or your ewe in relationship to that. One of the next items that I have here is something that I really want to stress. This here is a particular heat lamp that has a special shield on it to keep it from overheating, straw and hay. This is probably one of the items that has caused more barn fires over the years than anything else. Even in my own case, had a situation where a heat lamp had burnt things down. So be very careful with these. There are also heating mats that are maybe a little bit safer. This particular one has a great shield on it. But additionally, it has a very long cord, so we don't have to have extension cords running all over the barn. And I'd encourage you to invest in the proper wiring over top of your lambing and kidding jugs so that you can plug these in directly into an outlet as compared to having cords running all over. As those cords are often undersized, and with that in mind, will overheat, and those can also start fires. So not only the heat lamps themselves, but also the aspects of the cords. So make sure the cords are heavy enough if you do have to use them as well. I also like to use or keep a paint stick on hand. That way, if you are going through and you want to utilize or keep a particular ewe identified, you can take and mark that animal so that you know which one it is. Perhaps you saw her acting funny or what have you in the corner. This will allow you to mark her and keep track of her in relationship to things that are coming up, and you don't want to forget about her. Additionally, with sheep and goats, they sometimes, especially as they get older, they run into problems with things like milk fever, late term uh, uh, toxemia. So we have to be aware of that. And so having a product like propylene glycol or calcium on hand that you can administer to them orally are extremely valuable in relationship to ketosis. We want to be able to have these readily available so that we don't have to run into town and get them. And so I encourage you to have these. You can actually utilize a product or administer them through the oral application with this drenching gun. It's nicely calibrated with the number of cc's, and you just draw it up into this syringe and then place it in their mouth and gradually dose them with that down the side of on the inside of their mouth, down their throat, and they'll swallow that and get that energy into their system. In some cases, we can even go a step further. This is normally utilized for the lambs and the kids, but this Nutri-Drench is also a great supply of some vitamins, minerals, as well as that energy that you get in the propylene glycol in relationship to that. Now, for those of you that are lambing or kidding out on grass, this here is a belt that one of my farmers utilizes. And so with this is actually, it has the ability to put the lamb or kid right in this. And then with that in mind, he can actually take a scale out of his bag and actually weigh the lamb or the kid with this digital scale. It's extremely nice to have an idea of how much variation in size from one kid to the other. And you can see if there is a discrepancy, it allows you also, you can reweigh the animals after they should have been drinking and see if they're consuming milk from the dam or not. In addition to that, there's the ear tagger, excuse me, and the tags themselves. That's all in this pouch. And then the gloves, like I had mentioned before, the actual latex gloves. And then most importantly, also a record book. And this is so that you can keep track of particular ewes and which animals or offspring are theirs. And so if you see one that is not doing well, maybe you want to check her for mastitis and those sort of things. And so having good records of that is extremely important. In addition to actually being able to, in the long run, decide which ewes should be called if necessary, based upon how well she did throughout that season raising her offspring. Now, when looking at ear tags and tagging, there are many different styles. We have the Allflex or Duflex type tags. We have the Z tags. And then we have the metal tags that many of you are familiar with in relationship to putting in the scrappy tags that we have to do as well. And so finding the right type of tag that is visible on the lambs or kids, and also that are fairly well retained. And that is something that you will learn where to place them in the ear as being a critical component of successfully retaining them throughout the year. So spend some time looking into that. I have seen some tags that are really nice from the standpoint that they are specific to the farm, actually named. And so people change color on the tags from year to year if they want to do that, or change numbers or letters to keep track of what year maybe their future does or ewes are from. So that's a way in which to do that as well. If you have some suggestions of how you've seen that done, you could also include that in the chat as well. So once the lambs and kids are born, we want to be sure to utilize things like a clamp, fairly inexpensive, and also a scissors to have that in mind, especially if we are having trouble with dipping the navel. We want to make sure that that quits bleeding if necessary. And one of the sort of tricks that I've seen is using and tying that navel off with a piece of dental floss. And so that works quite well from that standpoint. Now, with that all in mind, I've got a few more items in relationship to assisting the birth. Some people utilize chain that can get quite cumbersome inside of the birth canal. I tend to utilize little, this is actually a parachute cord. It's very, very strong. Not that you need real strong cord, but just with simple ends tied and looped so that you can put them either over the feet to assist. I generally try not to utilize this. Probably more than anything is I utilize it to open up and put this behind the ears with this in the mouth if I need to guide the jaw. Now, here again, this is, you have to be gentle. These are very small, delicate animals. you need to be firm but gentle, I guess, is what I would advise in relationship to this. And so with that in mind, you can utilize something like this, especially if it feels like you're just not able to have enough hand strength to be able to pull. In my case, I have fairly large hands, so being able to get in there, fish it around the leg or foot, and then get my hand out of there gives the lamb or kid more space to come through that birth canal. And so, with that in mind, having something like this on hand can be fairly inexpensive, easy to wash up and disinfect, and actually very easy to put into your pocket if needed as well from that standpoint. Now, once the lambs and kids are born, sometimes, especially if we are dealing with a first time mom, she has just gone through a lot of trauma in relationship to giving birth. Sometimes she doesn't always recognize one or the other. And so we sometimes have orphans. And in that particular case, we've I've utilized products like this. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I'm not sure exactly why that happens, but trying different things like Orf No More and Mother Up, these are products that you put onto the offspring. And over the years, I've heard of many other home remedies as well that people have tried. Everything from putting certain types of feed ingredients on the newborn kids so that the mother wants to lick them, taking one of the offspring away that she really likes and just leaving the other one. And most likely, when you join them back up, it can be she'll perhaps take both of them from that standpoint. And then other thing that I really encourage is keeping after it, because generally once the mother's milk goes through both of them, both of the offspring or all of the offspring smell like the mother, and therefore she'll tend to claim them from that standpoint. We talked about the Nutrigench. Many many folks utilize many different types of products like this. Giving some of that to each of the newborns is pretty common, as they are anything to help that process along so they have more energy. And so Baby Lamb Strength is another product like this here, particular one, giving them the appropriate amount to get them off to a good start. Now, if you have a ewe or a doe that is not producing milk or hasn't had appropriate milk letdown and doesn't have the colostrum for the offspring, I encourage you to think about getting some colostrum replacer or colostrum supplement. And it's really important to know the difference between the two. Now, this here is actually a bag of colostrum supplement. The amount of IgGs or the immunoglobulins is quite a bit lower in this particular product. And in this case, being a bovine IgG, it has a lower fat content and a lower protein content. And the only reason I use this is because I had a bag of this on hand, and I didn't have any sheep. So keep in mind, IgG is something to keep and actually look at it in relationship to either sheep or goat as compared to bovine. Now, I have heard of people utilizing this, but realize that the other product is probably superior in relationship to supplementing the sheep and goats from that standpoint. And again, IgG. The higher it is, the higher the quality is from that standpoint. Now, the same thing is true for any of your orphans. Again, uh, using actual sheep or goat milk replacer is very important. It is more expensive than calf milk replacer, but it's because it's higher in protein and higher in fat, and it will allow those babies to really do well and flourish in relationship to that. I also have a bag of electrolytes. If you have any scours, those could be really helpful to rehydrate those lambs and kids in relationship to that. And so keeping track of that and having those things on hand so that you don't have to run for them, I think is a very, very useful to have that. So next, for those of you that have done this before, here's an esophageal tuber. It's a very flexible rubber tube that you actually put down through the esophagus into the stomach of those lambs and kids. The one end is enlarged, and this here syringe is quite a bit bigger, about 50 or 60 cc's. And once you go ahead and mix up your colostrum or your actual milk replacer, then go ahead and administer that. Now, as you do that, you can either take the plunger out of the actual syringe and allow the fluid, once it's full, to gradually drain. If you do use the plunger, make sure that you administer it very slowly, because if you push too hard on that, it can actually cause it to reflow up the esophagus and go down into the lungs, and you can cause trouble that way. So going through that in that manner is extremely it's a process that you have to be patient with, and so it's important to understand the risks, but if done correctly, can save a lot of lambs and kids if they are born and are weak, or they get dehydrated. Going through and using a tuber is extremely helpful. Now, in the case of does and ewes, this is a little bit larger esophageal feeder. It's actually for calves, but it can be utilized also for ewes to get glycol into them, energy, and some of these other products, as well as electrolytes if they become dehydrated for some odd reason. And so a tuber like this would be more for your adults as compared to the kids. I have a couple different bottles. This is a larger calf bottle, but it has a nipple for the size of a lamb or a kid. And then this here is an actual lamb and kid bottle. What I really like about this, two things. One, it's got a nice little Pritchard nipple on it. It's calibrated on the side, so you know how much that particular kid or lamb has consumed. But more importantly, as compared to a soda bottle, it's got a large hole that allows you to get a brush in and really do a good job cleaning out the inside of that, because they can get a little bit gross and gunky. And so having the ability to really do a good job cleaning this up is extremely helpful for the well-being of your goats and lambs. a little later in life, you'll have to, well, actually, in relationship to docking of tails and sheep, you can utilize the elastrator bands. Um, there's a couple different elastrator tools in relationship to putting donuts on. Um, these rubber bands are something you have to think about, especially in relationship to tetanus. And so making sure that you provide a tetanus shot in advance is really critical. You can utilize hot dockers. Um, with those, I really encourage you to be extremely cautious about fire. Again, very similar to the heat lamps. If you put them down, especially in relationship to dry hay or straw, it's very easy to cause fire. And so taking the necessary precaution is really critical. Keeping a side cutter pliers on hand is also very valuable when doing the banding, so that if you get them misplaced or you only get one of the testicles, you can clip that off and actually start all over. A little device that was brought to my attention is a device that you can pick the testicles up as you're holding that ram lamb or buck and slide this in. That way the testicles are both above that, and then you can place the bands over top of that to be sure that you get both of the testicles and not just one of them. Keeping these bands fresh is really critical. If they get old, they become brittle, and you can have bands that snap off. And so I encourage you to get new bands every single year in relationship to that. And so that you don't have premature breaking, and the actual band does what it's supposed to do in regards to that. Now, in some cases, especially for those of you that might be saving breeding stock, some people wait until a little bit later to castrate. And this here is a different type of bander. It's got a little bit more space and a much heavier band to be able to castrate those, and really allows you a little bit more flexibility as those testicles get a little bit bigger, and it's difficult to get through that small band from that standpoint. Now, in my case, having animals around, I tend to also make sure that I have things like different vitamins and minerals in the injectable form on hand. Things like iron, uh, selenium, I know from working with my veterinarian, is commonly in a deficiency in my area. So having Bosi on hand or Musi on hand is really critical. And so working with your veterinarian very closely is extremely critical to understand the dynamics of what is going on in your community, so that you have the right particular products on hand to help alleviate problems that you might come upon. B vitamins, very inexpensive, but sometimes can cause or induce intake or cause them to be hungry, and that can be extremely helpful. And then, of course, things like um, vitamin E, as well as A, D, and E, and then anemia in the case of um, animals that might be dealing with a load of parasites might cause the actual iron content in the animal to go down over time if not treated. So having some iron on hand could be extremely helpful. Additionally, I did see an item in relationship to things like lidocaine. Um, that's something that you need to work closely with your vet on in relationship to different aspects of utilizing that particular product. Um, I would say that as folks that are more beginners or novices, that's probably not something that you'd want to do yourself. You'd want to work with your veterinarian, have them come out and take you through that process and why you would utilize that. And then, of course, utilizing things like oxytocin, again, a scripted product for milk letdown, some general antibiotic uh, um, in relationship to like LA200 or, and then some um, Banamine or other anti-inflammatory sort of products. These are all things that you have to work very closely with your veterinarian to understand the dynamics of what they're about and how to utilize them. Now, the final item that I'd like to share with you is working working closely with your veterinarian. I think it's really critical to understand some of the metabolic disorders that sometimes happen and what occurs because of it. And one of the things as a beef producer, yes, I raised sheep in the past. Yes, I've had goats in the past. But being a beef producer, I probably learned more from sheep producers in relationship to this particular product or this particular issue than anything else. And that's the Clostridium perfringens type C and D, which is also known as overeating. And this is something you need to spend some time exploring. Lambs and kids, when they are feeling good and healthy, they just want to eat. And so, with that in mind, utilizing that vaccination can help get them off to a good start and keep them healthy throughout their entire life as they go and switch from consuming primarily milk then to consuming more grain and then pretty much grain and forage in the future. And so working with your vet to make sure that you get the right CDT into them is extremely important. With that in mind, I'd be happy to have it opened up to some questions. And with if there's questions, we'll see if I can find what you need to look at here, or hopefully Travis or I or Brenda can share some insights.
Awesome. Thank you, Troy. And even though it's in a webinar standpoint, and the crowd went wild, okay? So I could hear it. I don't know, again, how everybody's feedback was there, but I really appreciate that, Troy, for a very comprehensive approach there. I'm going to go a little shifty and just kind of mix it up a little bit, Troy, even before we get into some of the questions. So I have two of them that I'm interested in, and again, I think that we're better off on these, Mr. Salzer, if we can be interactive and at least in our chat box. And so, one of the questions that came up, and we will then reevaluate that as well, is just hints on grafting of orphan lambs / kids. Okay, and so the fun part about this, Troy, is that I am not going to task this one at you. I'm going to task this one to our audience because we have 100 people on, and everybody has their own secret trick, okay? And so some people find some things that work, even if you can kind of mute the mute's not the right word, but the smell or the nose from the mothers with different uses, or if there's restraints, and or if it's even working with them all the time, right? And so it can be a laborious job. And so, in fact, for those of you that are on here again, because we got about 100 people that have joined us, at least on this evening in January 2025. Feel free to put your information in there and we'll kind of discuss that. So, Troy, I hope that was a fun one to provide some tasks for some individuals. I'm going to go back again, kind of when we talked just a little bit about environment. What I really appreciated on environment, and again, this isn't new, but it's sanitation and just cleanliness is so important, right? And so lots of people can identify, what they want. If they want to put lime in there, even between, some do that, some don't. Some we're just lucky if they get it cleaned out at the end of the year, let alone in between each ewe or doe. Okay, so people have to identify where that fits in their timeline. And I don't know that there's right or wrong. Just even when we think about it, come from the sand and the concrete floors, sawdust, straw, corn husks. I guess I'm just going to open that up to you in terms of kind of plus and minuses. I think is the best way to evaluate that one, Troy, because there's not, it's what's available for people first off. But I'll just open that one up for betting in generalities.
So you brought up several good points, Travis, in relationship to the use of actually cleaning out, not scrubbing, but applying a coat of barn lime in between. Lime is very high in pH, and so therefore can be beneficial not only as a drying agent, especially if you are on a concrete surface, but additionally, it with that high pH, it will also help to alleviate some of the bacteria that might be present on the floor. Next, you gave a list of several good bedding products, and if I was to say along those lines, any of those products. I see in the picture behind you, there's corn stalks. As long as they're good and dry in advance, not having moldy, and that's true of straw as well, making sure that it's good and dry. They both can work fantastic. And I've even seen in some cases where people don't have corn stalks or straw. They utilized dry hay. As long as there's enough of it in there and it's removed, cleaned out, and then replaced with the next family as you put them in, it can be very successful. With the case of shavings, I like the larger particle shavings as compared to sawdust. They are drier than, say, sawdust, for example. And so they actually wick the moisture away, and that can be beneficial. Anything to keep the udder nice and dry and clean is really what you're after, as well as a nice bed for those newborns.
Awesome. Thanks for your input there, Troy. And in fact, the image that I got behind me, yes, that's fresh enough corn stalks that, as you can see, the one at least on behind my shoulder was grabbing it to eat a little bit too. So they showed it. They had kind of like a bale buster, all right, and so that kind of ground those corn husks up, and it was kind of neat to see. That's not what my family uses. We have more access to wheat straw or oat straw, but primarily wheat straw hopefully allows us a little bit better. And I think that's one thing, even when I think of it, and again, yeah, you said sawdust or sand, but what I'm more familiar with is the straw and in fact, of course, the big round bales, because then if you have enough area. The other thing to keep in mind there is storage. Okay, Troy. I mean, we don't want to forget about that, even when we're thinking about it. Is that even whether those are small bales or pre-made sawdust. I mean, if we have to buy wood chips all the time at the local farm store, then we're going to have a huge bill. Okay, so that one's going to be a little bit different as well. So I'll keep appreciate everybody's input on that. And that one's just kind of what's best for you. Again, it's not a best plus or minus. A couple things, a question, and maybe we can help with the jargon, is that it came up with jug Okay, Troy. And so you, as in YOU, all right, Troy. Also, when you talk about jug, people may or may not know. And so I envision them about 4 to 5 foot is what I say. They can be 4 foot by 4 foot, 5 foot by 5 foot. Some can be bigger. They don't have to be bigger, but then there can also be room for the lamb or kid to get away. Some things, you could put even just kind of a little hidden corner, but most don't. Most are just kind of squares that they can put those families in. What I consider that is that's the chance for the ewe slash lamb, doe slash kids to bond, right? And so they could spend some time in there. Hopefully, then we get enough, first off, colostrum, second off, milk. And so that then when you put them together, potentially in a grouping plan, that can happen. The inquiry is it comes up, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong on this one either. Is it better for the ewe slash doe? All right, sorry, we're doing all of this analogously. Maybe we should just pick and move forward, but to have its baby inside a stall or outside in the pasture. And so I'm gonna take an attempt at it, and then Troy, you may be a 180 on stuff. And first off, again, there's pluses and minuses. Most of the time, if temperatures are an advantage, I'm perfectly fine with them being outside in the pasture. Again, pasture in January in Fargo, North Dakota is not as good an idea, okay? Because our pasture is not brown, not green, it's white, okay? And so a difference from that standpoint. But we could still say that from in their group, okay, and in the barn. What I envision in terms of the pregnant ewe slash doe is a lot of times they like to be alone. And so one of the things when you watch them is that they will kind of move to a separate part of the barn. And not only if you're looking at, the rear of the animal for looking at options of when that birth is going to happen, but their kind of mood changes. All right. And so, those that are stockmen and astute in their interpretation can say, you know what, that one's going to have one by tomorrow morning. And most of the time, people can be right, correct, Troy? I mean, so they have that option. And so what you can do is that if there is one that is starting to lamb slash kid, is that if you feel that that's appropriate, or maybe you're limited on just a little bit of space, you can put those in the jug. And chances are when you come back in the morning or when you next check them, that everything's went right and they have a pair of twins on the ground. So I don't have any problems with it. It's just that we don't always see it. And most of the time, in my personal opinion, is that if you see one that's starting, you say, okay, that's the one, or you see its ear tag, or you remember where it's at in the barn or where it's at in the pasture, is that I would give them just a little bit of time to do it on their own instead of pulling it in, interrupting them. But again, I don't know that there's 100% answer. People can do what they want, but sorry, Troy, that was a long answer to a tricky question. I don't know if you have anything to add. I think I covered most.
I think there are a couple of things that I can think of, Travis, that I would maybe add as an aside. We briefly talked about ways in which to take care of orphans, and especially if we're in a situation where you have the animals too tight together in a small space. Sometimes the does and ewes will switch lambs, or they'll take after someone else's lamb because they think that they have given birth, but in reality, they haven't. And if you're going to have them in tight confinement like that, then it probably is a little bit better to pull her aside, put her in a jug, let her lamb or kid in that jug on her own, so she doesn't get mixed up in relationship to that. As compared to having them out on pasture, as long as you've got a good secure pasture where the lambs or kids can't get away, using an area that has a good woven wire fence so they can't get through the fence, or you don't have problems with the neighbor's dog or coyotes coming in. All of those things are really important to have a good success in relationship to that getting out the door.
Thanks for adding, Troy. I don't know that you've been in the sheep and goat business, if you haven't went out, either one morning or afternoon or whenever it may be, and have three of the females, let's call them does, right, and 9 kids, and trying to guess which one is which because they all pick the same corner, right? And so one can hope that you get them into the right pen, and then that's an important thing that hope and then truthfully, right or wrong, if they claim them, that's the bonus, right? Okay, if they claim them, then that's a great thing. And I think that's I want to bring back to our kind of our orphan question before we dig into again some of those back topics. And so we tasked our group to see if there was anything that they said was important to them. And so I'm going to provide a little bit of guidance here and some updates. So one individual says head gate the ewe for 3 days straight, and she will accept the lamb. Okay, so that's winning by losing. All right, and so allowing her that opportunity, and some people say that as well. Some farmers use the liquids from a dead lamb on a live lamb to help the ewe. And so yes, as long as that liquid or that fluid that came from the animal post parturition is from that ewe, right? Okay, and so they know their smell. Or if it's the twin, okay, and they accept one but not the other, is just make sure that they have that same smell. Would be one thing that would help us as well. Use the birthing fluids from the ewe on the lamb, okay, and so we just touched on that. Smaller pen size, potentially, but if they're not going to accept them or going to knock them to the corner, that could be a little bit of a tough spot. The ewe or doe's milk on the head and rump of the baby animal, okay, and then we go into again, several different things can be used to kind of mask, as I said, the nose of the maternal side. So this one says vanilla or eucalyptus oil, something that can help us if you don't have something different. But lots of people, again, have lots of different things. And so what you're doing is muting that smell factor from the mother to make sure that they will accept that as well. Okay, pen with a stanchion for mom, of course, access to food and water and ability to lay down. And then once the lamb gets its milk, hopefully that we're in a good spot. Let's see. You can use the skin. I mean, you can if you're talented, you can certainly peel the skin off and try to use that. That's a little tougher. It might be just a little bit easier to try to get some of the birthing fluid there. And then I think this one's good. Give it 48 hours. And if the ewe is still aggressive, that individual says, okay, I've had enough. All right. And it's better to have a live lamb or kid that you bottle than broken legs and or dead lambs. And so I think that's a really good idea.
The one comment that was made in relationship to placement of the different products on the head and on the tail head is a really good point, because that's the area that the mom tends to check out when she's evaluating who belongs to whom. So good point.
Thank you for those individuals. And again, I think everybody's got their own spots. But again, patience, I don't like that as an answer, but it feels as though that's one of the more requirements to success, right? Because we really don't want a large bottle pen that causes us more efforts and causes us less return on investment. First off, from a milk replacer, certainly more labor. Okay. Of course, that's the good thing from a family experience, because Troy, I knew a few days where I wasn't tasked with bottling lambs, at least as a youngster, right? So that is an opportunity that you can provide work experiences for 7-year-olds. Okay. An inquiry, I think we tackled a little bit on the tags, zoonotic risks, and I think I'm actually going to open it up a little broader. You touched on it, and I think that's why we use gloves, is from a zoonotic standpoint. And again, you said that we'd have the lube that we'd be able to use, but it becomes just bigger than one. The one that one of our colleagues mentioned on here is Q fever. In my opinion, Q fever doesn't happen at a high incidence from producer to producer or even animal to animal. And so most producers don't consider that a lead challenge in terms of zoonotic diseases, but it is something that can be an issue. The other thing is that that's very, very important about this is that if your female partner slash spouse is pregnant, okay, the lambing barn is not the best place and at least not the most sanitary spot for those individuals. So big picture, zoonotic diseases. Troy, what's your take home?
You really covered it. It's sanitation, using the gloves as you're going through this process, and utilizing the lube so you don't tear holes in the gloves and that sort of stuff. One of the things that frequently I actually do, not only when I'm just doing this sort of work, but also AI breeding and that sort of stuff, I'll oftentimes put a latex glove on, then put the sleeve over top. And what that does is it actually helps you from puncturing through the actual sleeve on your fingertips, especially if you're maybe pushing a little bit harder on it. And so with that in mind, just being careful, gentle but firm in relationship to how you're handling it. And so taking those precautions is beneficial. And then when you get done, of course, take the time to appropriately scrub up and utilize soap and do a good job that way as well.
Awesome. So when you're one of the questions, okay, so you have a cord when you are pulling the lambs and putting that onto again the hooves as they come at you. How long is that cord? Or I mean,
It's
like 3 foot?
the actual cord from the newborn.
Yes.
Yeah. Generally, maybe not quite 3 foot in relationship to that. As you're extracting that, you really need to be aware of head first, tail first. And as you're pulling that animal, we want to progress that through that birth canal, because once that cord is removed from its connection to the uterus, that lamb or kid will start to breathe, and we don't want them to be sucking in that uterine fluid in relationship to that. So being cautious about that.
We can use either, not just like the mini chain, but some reinforcement to get those legs up. Or the other thing is that if you're able to, the cervix is able to dilate and you can identify what location that we're coming. Again, it's best obviously so we can get them head forward and getting coming in the right direction. In fact, we have some previous webinars where we've talked a little bit more about birthing considerations or challenges. That wasn't exactly what we needed to accomplish this time, because you did a great job with our lambing kit as well. Is it possible to milk the doe or ewe before birth so there's some extra colostrum available? And I guess from my standpoint is that you would need to keep that. And I wouldn't consider that 100% of the answer, because you want to make sure that it gets into that lamb, and you'd have to worry about it as well. But your thoughts?
Even to go a step further, Travis, I completely agree with you. If we milk that out, it takes time to develop that colostrum. It isn't there immediately. It's not replaced with colostrum that she has in storage. That colostrum actually forms in the udder starting a month ahead of time. As that udder develops, she's creating that colostrum, and it is a much more dense product and also contains those antibodies that are absorbed directly across that gut barrier. And so anticipating using it in that manner, I don't think that that's the suggested best management practice from my perspective.
Right. It's going to be limited no matter what. It's if you milk that out, it's not like there's new colostrum hiding behind it or that they're going to make it, and so you just need to be utilizing what you do have and getting it into those animals. And it's so important. And, everybody does. I mean, big picture, a couple things that always come to mind for me is I'm just going to call it colostrum management, right, Troy? Is that if we don't get that into them, to have a backup plan so that we can get something into it. And then you talked about Clostridium perfringens C and D, which ends up, being enterotoxemia, overeating. And it's we can maintain improvements in the lambs if we are able to provide, again, that injection to the ewes prior to lambing. So one of the things that we can be ahead of, particularly now, and some may be into lambing and some it may be in the near future, but we can be ahead of it as well. So those are the big things that I think are important, that come at least top of mind. A side item, if that's what I was to call it, but you talked. I mean, we were digging on lambing, and this is still lambing because people make a decision of when they want to castrate those animals. Some may choose there in the jugs and in the barn. Some may choose at a later time. And I thought you did a great job with it. But one of the inquiries comes up with lidocaine bands. And so I don't know what your thoughts are, and I'll provide mine as well. But
I personally haven't utilized lidocaine in relationship to the actual bands. It would make sense that if they are treated in that manner, that minimizing that impact. But generally speaking, when you put the bands on those kids and lambs, the pain is fairly short-lived in relationship to that. Have you seen much work done in relationship to that, Travis?
yeah,
Or
thanks for asking. And in fact, we did some research on pain mitigation or management at our Hettinger Research Extension Center. And I guess my personal opinion is that we always want to think of what is best, no doubt, for the animal and from an animal welfare standpoint. But even when we look at it from cortisol levels and pain management, is that the pain that does happen is very quick. Okay. And so, and if there's not either then nerves that are there or that are a problem, the animals come back from it. And truthfully, if you walk away for a second and come back, they might be in a pretty good spot. And so if it makes you feel better as a producer to use the lidocaine bands, and it feels as though that's something that's helpful, then go for it. I think from the animal well-being standpoint, we just don't have all the science to say that we're changing their lives very much because it's short-lived in generalities. So I think that's just my opinion. But if it is an option that people can use if they so aspire. But appreciate everybody's input on that one.
along those lines, Travis, as people go ahead and use dehorning processes and that sort of stuff, that's a whole different situation. And that'd be a good place to think about the aspects of lidocaine and minimizing that, because that's a much more traumatic activity even compared to the castration process.
I would agree. And I think that the science would also tell us that from, again, pain management of the disbudding of goat horns is certainly something that causes a little bit more challenges to our animals. I think a good question as well. And in fact, we tried to get to most of our questions for people. So if we missed one, or if you want us to make sure that we catch that one, please rewrite that one in the box, or we'll kind of get closer to finishing up on today's event. But one that's important here is and again, this is up to everybody else as well, is what is your preferred way of heating up a cold or chilled newborn, Troy? Okay, and so one we probably could have or should have caught on this, and just why that's so important.
So lambsicles and kidsicles are never any fun in relationship to this. And probably one of the best ways that I've seen is utilizing a small box, a heater box with a little heater inside of that. Uh, Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 degrees, because that's really what they were used to inside of the womb. That's about the right temperature. And then utilizing things like a hair dryer or a heat gun. But you have to be very careful with that so that you don't burn those animals. I've seen people place these animals into a sink. You have to be extremely careful, and you have to be, because we do not, it's so critical not to get moisture in the lungs of that little one. But ultimately, it's probably the most efficient way to get the body core temperature back up. And so with that in mind, placing them in, again, water about 100, 105 degrees is an option. And I have seen that successfully used in relationship to that. So any other thoughts, Travis?
Yeah, we had some individuals on here that said using a 55-gallon drum. I've seen those, of cutting a hole in the bottom of, a plastic 55-gallon drum and allowing a heat source or the heat lamp in those. That's certainly an option. The thing that I would keep in consideration is then with both of our colostrum of when they're getting that colostrum, and if they're getting either the milk replacer or colostrum replacer or the milk from the ewe, is that we have to get those animals, and again, this isn't different in relation to goats or lambs or cattle or anything, warm enough before they're going to consume and allow that even colostrum to work. And so if you use that colostrum or the replacement for them when they're still cold, they're just not going to metabolize it appropriately and not get what you need to. And so maybe even from the Nutra Drench, like you said, can maybe help get us some energy in the animals and kind of get them going just a little bit more. And then one of the things is at least in in the promised land of North Dakota and Minnesota, is sometimes it gets brisk. Is that those lambs? Or lambs and goats, is that I still feel that if we can get them dried off, and if the mother takes the head start on us, but if we can get them dried off, they can get through even brisker temperatures. And so the worst thing that can happen for them, in my personal opinion, would be is that they're wet, and then that there's a draft or some wind to them. And so that's the two banger that can kind of help us. And so when we get those, then on the right path. And in fact, Troy, I will also say that many of our small ruminants are saved based on the tubing, right? So you showed the tubes that we can be able to use. I think that that's not a fun one, but an important one to evaluate as well, because I know even when I was, pre-adolescence or, trying to work with it and said, okay, just use the tube. And you're like, great. Okay. Now, no big deal. You just have to make sure that you get it into the right spot, that it's the stomach. And so I'm going to ask for that one. And then I've got about two more. Troy, in fact, again, I feel as though we would be remiss if we didn't talk about what are those like key items. Okay. We got to make sure that the tube goes down long enough. We got to make sure that we get it in the stomach, because there's few things more depressing than missing where we want to be with our tube.
Yeah. So your point is so well taken, Travis, in relationship to going through that process, being gentle about how we pass that tube into that stomach. Generally speaking, to the tune of about 12, maybe 12 inches, depending on the size of your goat or your lamb, maybe not quite that far, but getting that into the lamb. Travis, do you like having them in a vertical, or do you tend to leave the lambs and kids on their side as you're going through that process?
Oh, thanks for asking. I prefer more vertical.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so I would hold the animal up with its front feet and torso, if that's what it's called, which would allow kind of maybe a little bit more elongation of the esophagus. And I hope that it makes it that they can open that up, and so that we can use that tube. And so again, much like the decision of if we have only 2 days for the ewes to claim them, it's better to have a bottle lamb than to have one that got hurt. And this as well is that it's better to at least give that a try and try to get some fluids and some calories and help into those animals, because no doubt, I mean, we can say diseases and cold and everything, but it's really starvation that causes the most deaths amongst our young sheep and goats, because we just need to get some products in them so that they can get their digestive tract working.
Along those same line, Travis, as I'm passing it in, I like to be behind the animal,
Mhm.
and so that you kind of naturally feel that movement of that tube down their esophagus. And I tend to try to stay to the right side as I'm passing that in um, to the into the stomach. And then again, reinforcing what I said before. Be patient with the process of putting those fluids into that stomach. If you are going to squeeze it in, be patient with it and making sure that you administer it over the appropriate amount of time. So.
Outstanding. I got a couple just easy ones for us, Troy. If the lubricant that you're using freezes and then thaws, would it still be usable, or should we get a new one?
Generally speaking, it separates and it doesn't stay the same consistency of what it is supposed to. There are some dry products. Have you utilized any of those dry products, Travis, that come in a bucket and you mix it up with a little bit of water? Um, have you tried those?
Not at a high level of my own working with stuff, so
Uh,
I know that they exist.
I have utilized them, and they seem to be equally as good as some of these others. So if you are one that tends to keep your kit in a cold space, that'd be a way in which to avoid that problem and keep it long term. And they tend to be pretty slippery, so I'd think about that maybe.
So one of the big important things for ewes slash does is electrolytes. Okay. Again, we can use even electrolytes, obviously, for the babies, but it depends on where you want to be. And so, in fact, some people would even put electrolytes in the water, because and you don't have to. Okay, I would say again, it's probably a pretty small majority. Nearly everybody would say, "Hey, I'm just getting fresh water. That's calling it a win." Okay, the electrolytes is dollar out of my pocket, and keeping that fresh. And so, big picture, so much so after we've gotten past parturition, is that we want to. It's really, really important, right, that they're getting enough water. Hopefully, your barn isn't cold enough that it's freezing up the buckets, but that may or may not be the case as well. But also, then there's electrolytes, or like you said, some of the different drenches. And so, big picture, are there things that we should kind of look at when we're making some of those purchases to get both the mamas and the babies just with enough energy? And I think that's appreciate everybody for joining us. But if we can get enough energy in those, then we're moving forward on the right path. Troy?
Yeah. So A lot of that is taken care of through proper nutrition, and proper nutrition is a good source of clean, palatable water. Now, in a few areas, especially in my part of the state, I am working with folks on the Iron Range. They tend to have high iron content, and so therefore, having something like electrolytes in the water can increase the intake, and that can be beneficial. But generally speaking, just a good source of clean water is adequate in relationship to that. Now, if she becomes dehydrated for one reason or another, that's a whole different story. Then electrolytes can be extremely valuable to rehydrate her. And, you know, watching their eyes can really be a good indication. Lifting their skin, seeing how that responds and comes back into place, all indicators of being dehydrated, and keep that in mind.
One brainstorm that I had that we can add to the toolbox. Troy, you did a tremendous job, and thanks for showing so many tools or supplies. But eye clips for inverted eyelids. I don't know if that one could be one that happens too. So sometimes you'll get inverted eyelids, and people can manage different ways of how you try to get rid of that. But the clips at least provides you an option that kind of rolls back that eyelid. If that's not a challenge as well. But again, thanks for bringing up the dehydration and truthfully the importance of hydration, right, for our maternal side of those animals. And then well, again, that was not the function for today's evening is nutrition of those ewes/does. Okay, that's its own. But if we can provide water, bedding, and also enough nutrition for those, then we can hopefully increase the amount that we're getting first off the colostrum to those lambs and kids and putting them on the right path. And so once they move out of the lambing/kidding jug, and so thanks for everybody's patience there of allowing those analogous options there along the way, because so much of it is or could be very similar along the way to management. So appreciate everybody joining us for this evening. I know that our colleague Brenda had put up a survey for you, and we're excited here with my joint appointment with North Dakota State University. We are extending knowledge and changing lives, and through our University of Minnesota Extension, we are driven to discover. And so we have a great opportunity. It's January 27, 2025. Hopefully lambing and kidding season is in your near future. And my summary, Troy, is that, even from an agriculturalist, from a livestock standpoint, is that there's very few things that are more exciting than new births. All right. And so we get to be a part of agriculture in America and providing the next generation of sheep and goats. So appreciate everybody's assistance in terms of just animal stewardship, husbandry. And the reason that you're on here today or watching this at a later time is because you care. And it's about that. It's about what we can do to make sure that the animals that are under our direction, that we were given the opportunity to oversee, have a positive and good life. And so thanks for those that have watched us today for an hour and a half. It's because you care, and it's because you want to make positive impacts in the animal agriculture industry. So thanks for feeding the world. Enjoy your evening.
Good luck.